Hey, good evening, everyone. Simon Jacobson here, and I welcome you all. I think I have to come up with a better opening because I just keep repeating myself every week. But I hope after the opening, everything else is different. That's the good news. Okay. So it's about seeing the extraordinary within the ordinary. So, in the spirit of our weekly journey here, which is hopefully, at least my attempt, for it to be exactly that, a journey, I came to discover, and I have always maintained that the most beautiful and powerful way to experience Judaism and Torah study is not in an academic sense alone, but exactly that, a journey, an experience, which of course immediately takes it out of the realm of just the mind and mind games. As powerful and as brilliant as the Torah may be, it brings it into the realm of real life experience. As I mentioned last week, and I think I mention almost every week, the key operative word is relevance. Torah comes from the word hera. The word Torah, literally, what does the word Torah mean? So the English translation is Bible, but the word Torah comes from the word hera, moira derech, means to show the way. It's like an instruction manual, a guide. What do we usually use as showing our way? It's a GPS system, a navigational system, a road map, which means when you're traveling somewhere and you don't know how to get there, or even if you know the name of the place, the road maps, the geography is complicated. So a good road map lays out the landscape so you can navigate and find your way in the fastest way possible. Life, too, is a journey that we're on all the time, every day, every moment. And this journey has twists and turns, and ups and downs, and many blind spots, and many unexpected situations. So the Torah serves as a roadmap that helps us navigate the landscape of our soul and its interaction with the world in which we're in. So most of us, we navigate. Technically, we learn to navigate. We learn life skills and defense mechanisms to protect ourselves. But to truly find a navigational system that helps your soul travel, helps you look at a situation with clarity and determine, is this for me or is it not for me? Whether it's relationships, whether it's new friends, you go to places, you read books, you travel. To make these choices, what should you assimilate into your life, what should you not? Most of our choices are made really either randomly, based on circumstances, based on whim, and often based on old habits, things we picked up at home or in our lives that shape our reality. Because all of us don't come in like a clean slate. We come with baggage. We come with preconceived notions. We come with an education that was given to us rather than one that we chose. So there's a lot that is forming and shaping the way we navigate our lives. The Torah comes as a equalizer to help give true direction. And that's the word Torah. It comes from the word hera, direction, directive, instruction. Torah also comes from another word, or. Torah, or, same root, light. And if you think about it, light is also another navigator. What does light do? When you turn on a light in a dark room, it doesn't create or change anything. Everything in the room remains as it was. The only thing that light does is allows you to see what's what. So if there was no light on, you can bump into a table, God forbid, fall down steps, not know what the objects are, how to use them. You can use healthy objects in unhealthy ways, and unhealthy objects in healthy. The whole thing is confusing. Light just changes one reality. It changes our ability to see beyond the darkness. So if you think about our lives, are we living in light or are we living in darkness? I know they like to say that the Middle Ages were the Dark Ages. And today, it's essentially suggesting we're in illuminated ages. But are psychologically, our relationships in the areas of love, relationships, intimacy, are we really like in the very illuminating ages? Yes, I guess when it comes to technology, we call this the age of knowledge, information revolution. We have definitely a higher standard of living than the Middle Ages. Science sees the universe in much more powerful ways than they saw it perhaps then. When it comes to the personal issues, are we really more evolved than they were then? Is it like more healthy family life? People are really more trustworthy. We've really become more refined and evolved human beings. You know, I'm not going to say it's worse. I'm not going to say it's worse today than then. Maybe it's the same, but is it better? Who can make such a statement? Because we still live, when it comes to our psyches, and when it comes to our emotional needs, we still have subjectivity just as they had then 500 years ago. We still are driven by temptation. We're seduced by all kinds of stuff. We will do many self-destructive things for instant gratification. I don't think that has changed. Human nature has not changed. Our tools have changed. Yes, today you can buy a sack of potatoes in 5 seconds, and to get that same sack of potatoes 500 years ago, you had to spend 2 days in the field working. So our tools have changed, that we're able to derive, we're able to develop. Industrialization has sped everything up, and the computer, of course, has sped it up even further. But it's as ridiculous as saying that television made our personal relationships healthier than radio did. It would be the equivalent of saying the internet or the computers has made our personal relationships healthier. As a matter of fact, some people say television has destroyed relationships. You know, just look in the bedroom. It's a great tool to separate two people. You know, you have to watch a show and that's it. Great way to escape. I was standing with somebody the other day, and literally face to face, and I see him texting. I think I mentioned this last week, I don't know. And I asked him, who are you texting? And he suddenly realized it's me. I said, I'm standing here, you know. So of course he was quick on his feet, so he says, I can't get your attention, so I'll text you. The problem is I didn't have anything with me to receive that text. Okay, small little problem. So we have to remember, as they say with technology, junk in, junk out, garbage in, garbage out. When it comes to human beings, all the technology, don't ever deceive yourself into thinking that the gadgets and the gimmicks and the toys and the computers and whatever it is change relationships. If anything, they can actually be destructive because they deceive you into thinking you become more evolved. Look how much you can do, multitask in 1 hour. You know, but when it comes to relationship, multitasking is not necessarily a great tool. You know, that children, and look at little children and tell me how much technology really helps a parent nurture a young newborn child. Yeah, maybe you can monitor them from another room with technology. You can give them a toy to keep them distracted. But love and the nurturing that only holding someone, embracing them can give, there's no way that can be replaced. And it will never be replaced. Not with Kindle and not with all the other new electronic gadgets. It will never be replaced. At least I hope so. If people think it's going to be replaced. That story with the professor who got so smart for himself, too smart for himself and too busy to give his class. So he came up with a great idea that he's going to record his class. These are the days of the cassette tape recorder. You remember that? And he puts a cassette of his class, and he asks the secretary assistant to go put it into the tape recorder, and have the class supposed to listen to this and take notes, and they're required information. And that way he can do other things, be busy, traveling, getting awards, etc., while they're listening to this course of his. So one day, months later, he walks into the university just to see how brilliant his idea is working. He peeks into the room, and lo and behold, there are no human beings in the room. On every desk, there's a cassette tape recorder in the record mode. So they learned by example. His tape recorder is in the play mode playing, and every student says, you know what, I'm too busy to come here. I'll just leave my tape recorder. I'll record what his tape recorder. You know, my machine will speak to your machine. Done. I would say that's a great lesson in real education, by example. So the Torah is a light and a roadmap when read properly. When read improperly, it's just a old history book, if that at all. Or some will call it mythology, or some will call it superstition, or some call it the inspiration of our ancestors. But when read properly, which frankly is the only way to read it, because why would we be sitting and reading a book from thousands of years ago? It's a true roadmap. It's a spiritual map that really maps out, lays out the coordinates of our soul, of our lives. And not that it's some type of predictor of what's going to happen tomorrow, but it gives you the tools to navigate whatever will happen. A good swimmer doesn't know what's coming next in the next leg of his swim. But whatever is coming, he's trained enough, or she's trained enough, to navigate, to move about. So someone that is wise, someone who's trained, doesn't mean they see everything. It just means that whatever comes your way, you're equipped with all the tools that you need, with a flashlight to put the light on to see through the dark. That's the difference between intelligence and lack of intelligence. An intelligent person, a trained eye, is a sense of, you could call it like light. You go to somebody with a dilemma. You have, let's say, a personal dilemma, a psychological dilemma, emotional issue. You talk to someone who is objective and wise and has experience. What they're really doing is shining a light that you can't shine on your own because you're too blinded or you're too subjective. They're shining a light into crevices and corners and nooks and crannies of your own psyche to see things. And they're able to see beyond what we can see with the naked eye. When one studies Torah, you really get this type of X-ray of the human being, X-ray of the cosmos, X-ray of the soul, which obviously allows us then to understand the dynamics and distinguish between the symptoms and the roots, between the causes and the effects, and to be able to really take control of your life. That's the difference between a person with a roadmap and with a light and a person without a light. So the light doesn't change anything, but it changes everything. It doesn't change the realities, but it changes your perception of them. And then you can know, this is the road I should go on, and this is the road I shouldn't go on. How many mistakes have we made in our lives where we came to a fork in the road? And not like Yogi Berra said, to take it, where we took the wrong path. And maybe never forget that, and always regret the fact that we made that mistake. So the light shines and gives you a sense of how to use things. So everything in life can be used for destructive purposes, constructive purposes. What light does, it just tells you a table in the dark you can bump into. In the light, you sit down, you use it for a table to eat at, to read, to meet somebody. So objects that are usually healthy can become completely destructive if you don't know what to use them for. So the Torah tells us, here are the objects that you will engage in your life, you will encounter, and here are the ways to use them, and here are the ways not to use them. So, and if you think of it that way, it's a whole different perspective on Torah as a directive, as a lesson, as a blueprint for life. So with that small introduction, which really applies to every detail and every episode and every tradition and every Shabbos and holiday, you name anything in Judaism falls under this umbrella of being a directive in life. And if you don't see how it's illuminating your soul, then you know that you're not seeing something. So ask. So you have not only the right, but the obligation to ask that question. You read a story in the Torah and say, to put it maybe most reverently, say, who cares? Why should I care about this story? Why should I care about something that happened so long ago in a different time and place? Which really means, what relevance does it have to me today? And if you ask the question, the question of a wise person is half an answer, you'll find the answer. So the first thing I give you here is the license and the right to ask. I'm not giving it to you. It's not me to give you. It's given to me. It's given to us by all of us, by our masters and teachers, and by God Himself, that this is critical to ask that question. And then, of course, the answer has to be to find what is that directive. So beyond all the commentaries and all the layers of interpretations in every verse in the Torah, there's something much more profound, much more powerful, which is its meaning to you, my personal application. And the application to you is not necessarily the application to me. And the application to you today is not necessarily the application to you tomorrow. This is the way Judaism in its fullest sense should be lived. So we say the Shema, for example. The most famous of all liturgies is the Shema in Judaism, Jewish prayer. The Shema is one statement that says, Hear, O Israel, God is one, basically. You could say, well, that's a technical statement. Everybody makes it the same way. It's not correct. If you say it the right way, it should never have twice the same meaning, even to you. Because what does the word one mean? One has different meanings. You have unity in your life, fragmentation. And I can go on with an infinite amount of applications. And that's the real beauty of it, the partnership, of taking a story, a message, and applying it to yourself, in your personal situation. That's where it gets really vibrant, because every situation is different. So it's one thing we read a Torah in abstract, and we say, okay, wow, that's a great story. It's another when you apply it to your life. And this is essentially, I would say, the mission and the goal that I try to achieve in every class. I frankly see this as the only and the ultimate way to study Torah. I don't want to say only way, because there are definitely many methods of studying that are more academic, that are more historical, that are more biblical analysis, halachic. But if you talk about the full spectrum, if it doesn't come to this type of consummation, what does it mean to me? And how does it personally illuminate those dark paths of my life? The bottom line is missing. And frankly, without that, why would one really dedicate their life with passion to study it anyway? I mean, it's one thing to do it mechanically, out of guilt, out of obligation. So with that being said, and as I said, this is a statement that can be said about any Jewish detail, every iota of Judaism and of Torah. I'll apply the same principle now to this week's chapter, which is called Chayesara. It immediately provokes us with a very fundamental question. The name of a chapter, like the name of a book or the name of anything, should reflect what comes afterwards, right? If a name doesn't reflect what comes afterwards, it shouldn't be named that way. So here you have, if you read the full sentence, it's actually, you could almost say it's deceptive. It's like saying the life of Sarah. Yeah, but read on. These are the years. The life of Sarah, she lived 127 years. And she died. So really, the life of Sarah is like only a half a sentence. It's saying, this is the end of her life. When you name something the life of Sarah, you would assume, okay, now we're going to read a chapter about her life. The fact is, her life is actually told in the chapter earlier, the chapter preceding. The last two chapters talk about Sarah's life. Here, talk about her death, the search for a burial plot, her burial, and what happens subsequent to that. How then Abraham, her widower, decides to feel the need to go find a wife and a bride for his son Isaac. How Isaac finds Rivka, they find Rivka for her, and Rebecca, Isaac recognizes is for him because she was in the same spirit, with the same beauty, and the same virtue, and the same chen, the same grace, like his mother. Yeah. Some people want to marry someone like their mother, in good ways. So really, this entire chapter, from beginning to end, not one verse is about her life. It's all about her death and on. So why would the Torah, why would we use a name that is so, as I said, so deceptive in a way? There is another chapter that has a similar story. The end of the last chapter in Genesis is almost a carbon copy of this. Vayechi it's called. Vayechi also means to live. And there again, Vayechi Yaakov. Jacob lived 17 years, last 17 years in Egypt, and the rest of the story is about his death and his burial. So there too the same question can apply. But one chapter at a time, we'll deal with this one here. Okay. So I'll begin with this. I was quite a few years ago, I was asked to speak at a shloshim, which is the 30-day ceremony, or I guess commemoration of after a person's death. So after 30 days, you go, you honor it. You have people speak, honoring the departed soul. So I was being driven, I remember, on the West Side Highway, and I was looking for what I'm going to talk about. So I was looking out the window, and suddenly a billboard jumped out at me. And you get great speeches from billboards, by the way, if you pay attention. And this was like perfect. I had my whole speech ready right there. One billboard. Now what was the billboard? It was, no, it was not a Torah message from Genesis. Actually, it was the week of Chayesara, as you'll see in a moment, but the billboard was an ad for Newport cigarettes, of all things. Anybody works for Newport here? I don't want to offend any. So Newport cigarettes was the ad. It was one of these massive billboards on the West Side Highway. These beautiful vibrant couple with that face that you can die for. There's two faces, and the whitest teeth you've ever seen. And Newport, and on top it says, alive with pleasure. And of course, at the bottom there's the big box, the prerequisite box says smoking kills or whatever, causes fetal. I don't even want to repeat what it says. Okay, but that's part of the paradoxes of American life. You can have the box and the ads work. And not only are they alive with pleasure. That's what really struck me. And as I said, the whitest teeth, no person ever has such white teeth, especially someone that smokes. And there's not a picture of their x-ray of their lungs. But as Madison Avenue tells us, it's not what happens, it's what people think happens. It's not what happens, what people perceive is happening. And I got my whole speech right there. What was the speech? I basically said, okay, here is the standard for alive with pleasure. And when you look at this couple, this two beautiful man and woman, you really want to be like them, and therefore smokes Newport. Basically, that's the message. You want to look like them, smoke Newport. You know, what the logic in that, I don't know, but that's how we do it. Or people like that smoke Newport. So that type of thing. I'm not going to overanalyze it, but the point is that it has its impact, and people get the message that this is being alive and with pleasure. So what does it mean to be alive? That was the theme of the talk I gave. And here I'll embellish on it. What does it mean to be alive? I don't know if you ever think about this question. No. Usually when things are going well, we don't think about questions like this. We usually think about being alive when things aren't going so well. And you have, God forbid, short breath, or something else is hurting you, or something's bothering you, then you start thinking, what is this life thing? As I mentioned many times in this class, life doesn't feel like anything. What does it mean to feel? What does health feel like? What does it feel like being healthy? As soon as you feel it, there's a problem. Healthy should not feel anything. It's seamless. It's like breathing. If you feel something, if there's a sensation, if there's any impediment, the sign there's a problem. So what does it mean to be alive? That's what this chapter title challenges us and provokes us into asking that question. And it's a very fundamental question. It's not a philosophical one, as you'll see. It touches every choice we make all the time. So, to discuss it, let's say, a more comprehensive way, thoroughly, what does it mean to be alive? Okay. Little children are so not self-conscious, they don't even ask this question. If you go over to a 5-year-old and say, what does it mean to be alive? Probably laugh or ignore you. It makes no sense, the question. So at some age, we begin to think about things we're able to think about ourselves in a more detached way. We don't just experience it and can say, I'm alive. What does it mean that I'm alive? So doctors and scientists will give us a medical definition for life. There's what defines life and what defines death. When they declare someone, God forbid, dead, there's certain vital signs that are missing. It's not just breath, not even just the heartbeat. There are certain signs today that medicine has to establish, because heartbeat can stop, breath can stop, even the brain can stop functioning for a while, and still a person is still alive. So there's a medical definition of what we call being alive, the biological definition. In layman's terms, being alive means if I breathe, my mind is working, my heart is beating, that's alive. Now, of course, if you want to really be technical, you could also have a vegetable, God forbid, in a coma, and they're technically alive. Unfortunately, there are people in that situation. They may not be conscious, or they may be conscious. We don't know. But nothing is moving, but they are physically alive, and you can't declare them dead. It's weird, but Ariel Sharon is in that situation in Israel for years now. How many years is it? He had a stroke, and just remains technically alive. Obviously, none of us would vie for or suggest that that's called being alive in the fullest sense, but it has a technical definition as well. So then, let's go to the next step. So, if it's not just, that's the minimal of being alive. Let's go further. Further is a person who's functioning like an average person, walking, talking, breathing, not in the, God forbid, in a vegetable state. Nevertheless, some people say, I feel like a zombie today. I feel like I'm dead. Dead inside. So you can be really technically healthy and everything is functioning well, but emotionally you can be dead. Broken, bitter, disappointed, or just feel nothing. You hear people say that many times. I feel dead inside. I feel nothing. So technically on one end they're alive, but are they really alive? So on an emotional level you can say the emotions are not really functioning. And emotions, I don't just mean they're feeling pain or feeling a burn or feeling a sensation. I mean emotions as in love and in a situation. People get numbed, desensitized, and just don't feel. Then there's intellectual life. You could be emotionally alive, but intellectually your mind is not stimulated. You don't feel excited about ideas. You don't feel excited about new things coming. What I just described, by the way, are 3 levels of the soul out of 5 that I'll talk about. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, and Chai Yechida. The Medrash says, and the Kabbalists explain, that a soul that gives us life really has 5 dimensions to it. The most basic is the Nefesh. That's the soul that gives biological life. God forbid, the minimum of a vegetative state also has a nefesh that is working. But the rest are not. Ruach, emotional life, neshama, intellectual life, and the other 2, which I'll explain in a moment, are not functioning there. Or if they are, they're almost completely at a minimum. But biological life there is. When a person has an emotional experience and feels somewhat emotionally stimulated or alive, or touched, even if it's a negative emotion, the ruach is also functioning. Then you have the neshama, is intellectual life, and then you have the last 2, which are a little more abstract. It's called chaya, which is transcendental life. So you can have a person that's biologically alive, emotionally alive, intellectually alive, but transcendental, they don't have any transcendence. They live a life of monotony. They don't feel that the ability to escape the trap of the routines of their lives. Now, just to explain transcendence, in case somebody doesn't fully understand, transcendence is the human need to break out of your own habits. So even intellectually, you may be stimulated emotionally, but transcendence, for some, transcendence is through romance and love. For others, spirituality, religion, faith. It could be music, art, anything that, in a sense, transcends your present circumstances is a transcendent experience. Obviously, mysticism in its fullest sense is ultimate transcendence. But anything that gets you to a place that is out of where you are. Some people experience transcendence through foreign substances, without mentioning names. I don't mean of people, of the substance. And then there's the final 5th dimension, which is called Yechida, which actually shines once in the year, the most open, apparent way, which is on Yom Kippur, which is why we have 5 prayers in Yom Kippur, all 5 levels of the soul. Yechida is this place which is even beyond transcendence, if you can imagine that. What's beyond transcendence? A type of complete seamlessness and sense of unity, where you're not separate, there's no subject and there's no object. It's when you're completely in an experience, where you're no longer self-conscious about the experience. As soon as you're conscious about an experience, there's you and there's the experience. A true, full, seamless experience is the experience of Yechid. It happens in our lives, different moments. Usually cannot be initiated by people who don't know how to get there, but it's definitely the most profound possible experience. Those magical moments where everything just makes sense, everything just gets connected. You don't even feel, as I said, you are not separate from your experience. It's all one. Like a fish in water. The fish doesn't feel the water. Like water, wetness, water doesn't get wet because it is wetness. So, to use an expression from Isaiah, he says, a world that will be filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. There's 2 ways to experience knowledge. There's I know something. As soon as you say I know something, or I've discovered something, you're really saying is there's the I that discovered a new piece of information or a new revelation or a new epiphany, a new idea. Then there's a point where you become so one and united and integrated with the knowledge, you don't say I know it. You could almost say that it knows you. Or you and the knowledge become so much one that you don't even distinguish between you and what you know. This is when knowledge becomes absolutely integrated into a human being, into your experience. It's not no longer just a revelation, oh, I learned something new. It's so much part of you. When we say, Ein Chacham Kabal Nisayon, there's no one as wise as the person who has experience. So I once shared this with somebody, and he said, oh, I studied that, I know that too. He thought he read that that you can't be wise till you have experience. By reading it, it's like he gained the experience. No, that's not enough. You have to actually have the experience. What do they say about the man with money meets the man with experience? So the man with experience ends up with the money, and the man with the money ends up with the experience. And it happens usually more than once in your lifetime. Maybe you have to change your careers if it happens too often. But at some point, experience is something that becomes so much one with you. You cannot compare the knowledge. The same knowledge that you learned the first time you learned it in school or in a book or someone shared it with you, and then when you experience it, the same piece of knowledge is no longer the same thing. But someone will say to you, technically it's the same thing. You know exactly what I know. Yeah, but I experienced it and you didn't. You can't really explain what that means until you experience it. And we all have some experiences, so you could apply that to the situation. What is experience? Experience is where knowledge becomes one with you, and there's no longer a subject and an object. It's not I know it, I am it, basically. Or it is me. Or it's so one that you don't even use those terms. So, I just described 5 different definitions of life, really, what it means to be alive. Obviously, it goes without saying that we all would love and aspire to have all 5 dimensions. To really be alive would mean to have all be alive in that sense. You meet people all the time, and people are very powerful, and they wield a lot of power. People are terrified of them. But the day they're gone from this earth, besides some that breathe a sigh of relief, they're forgotten. Yes, some of them spend a lot of money to be remembered. Monuments are built, or other things are built. The pharaohs of old built pyramids where they're to deify and honor themselves. But compare that now to Sarah. So though we know where Sarah is buried, but the bottom line is, what Abraham did for her and what we remember is the virtues that never die. The virtues that she lived by, because she passed them on to people around her, they live on forever. So when you talk about life, you want to know what the real test of how do you know someone's really alive. It's sometimes very difficult to see it when you're looking at people straightforward, because you'll think of the most powerful person right now, he's the one that's most energetic, most alive. Whereas another person who may not wield any power may seem very weak. But the question really is, how do you define life? If life is defined by influence, money, fear, power that you have over others, yes, the one that has that seems to be more alive. But if life is defined by sensitivity and empathy and by love, then it's a whole different definition. So really, this chapter challenges us all to really define how do you define life? If you haven't thought about it, maybe now is a good week to think about it. How do you define life? And I can guarantee you that you probably define it different times in different ways. And sometimes we define it in a very, very callous and insensitive way. When we are perhaps caught up in the rat race, and we see others behaving in very aggressive ways, we think aggression is being more alive, is more aggressive. And there are times of introspection when you step back and you see some true beauty and true sensitivity, you see life in a different way. I've seen young people, you look in their eyes, and you see death, you see dead eyes. And I've seen 90-year-old men and women that have the sparkle in their eyes of a newborn. I'm not suggesting that it's mutually exclusive. Hopefully we can have both, the best of both. Have the life of a young person plus the sparkle and sense of adventure of a person that has the experience. But the point is that all just demonstrates that there are many ways to define life, and there are many ways that we ourselves can be our own worst enemies in how we look at this. So I could speak from my own experience a bit. When the way the mystics look at the universe, which really has a certain poetry to it, is one of the ways they see everything is that even though on the surface level we see in this room tables, chairs, even people, objects, floor, ceiling, books, and so on. If you really look deeper, the way the mystics put it is that we have dancing particles. Dancing, they call it nitzutze gedusha, sparks, holy sparks, that are constantly, dynamically moving about all the time. And they're waiting to be released by the person who interacts with them. So when you look at the apple in the tree, so if you're hungry, you grab the apple, you eat it, and that's that. But the way a sensitive mystic would look at it is that the apple has been waiting from the beginning of time for you to come there and take it off the tree, bite into it, and then its energy becomes part of your energy, and together you can make a better world. So one of the Hasidic Rebbes, when he was a young child, was walking with his father in the woods, and the little child inadvertently tore off a leaf from the tree. So his father said to him, rebuked him. He said to him, "What right did you have to tear off a leaf from the tree? It was living peacefully on that tree. What was benefited? Why do you have that right?" And this taught sensitivity, because the leaf from the tree is part of a bigger cosmic picture that we may not understand. But in our own insensitivities, our own indulgences, we ignore it. Hasidic saying goes like this: when a wicked person walks on the street, the cobblestones cry out, "What right do you have to walk on me? I've never desecrated God's name. I've never defiled my destiny. What right do you have to walk on me?" And when a tzaddik, a righteous person, walks on the cobblestones, they say, "Walk more, walk more." In a few chapters from now, we will read how Jacob goes to rest, and the stones actually argue about who's going to be under this tzaddik's head. Because even though it's metaphorical, but there's a sense that the universe is energy. And energy senses energy. And when there's an energy that welcomes that energy into its life, it joins together like two flames that join together, and they become more powerful. So that's the reason that in Judaism, for instance, you make a blessing before you put a piece of food in your mouth. You watch what you eat. It's not just thanking God for giving me the food. It's also a sensitivity to that apple. What right do you have to touch that apple? Maybe it should be eating you. So it's true, just because you're more powerful. But when you think of it that way, there's a spark in the apple. The Baal Shem Tov, who's known to elaborate on these themes that I'm describing here, once sent his students on a trip. Go somewhere, do a certain mission that he gave them. We don't even know what the mission was, as you'll see from the story. They came back, and they were excited to share with him that they accomplished the mission. Baal Shem Tov wasn't even interested about the mission. He said to them, he wants to know how they traveled. Strange question. So they said, well, they took this road, that road, through this city, that city. That wasn't enough. He wanted the details. He said, so tell me exactly what happened. So you left the city, you left our town 2 weeks ago. Where'd you go? Went down this road. What happened by night? Well, by evening we said the prayers. Then we found there was a nice place on the side where we could lie down to rest a bit. And what did you eat? What did you drink? The Baal Shem Tov was asking, so they understood there must be some significance in all of this, even though they didn't get it, because this is only a stepping stone toward a destination. And they said, well, there was a little brook of water there, and we took some water from that, and we drank it, and we ate it with some of the food we brought over. Baal Shem Tov suddenly jumped up in this type of excitement, and he said the following words. He said, that brook of water was waiting from the beginning of time for you to come there and make a blessing on it and drink it and then use that strength to fulfill your mission. Had you not done it, the water would still be waiting. Think of this as an attitude to life. Imagine every time we have an interaction with people, people for sure, but even objects, even mineral, water, vegetable, animal, our environment, and of course people, that every time you meet something, it's an opportunity. Something's been waiting for you, for that moment, for you to meet that thing. And for both of you to grow through it. That's an attitude that there are people on this earth that live with all the time. Not just some type of, we'll have a retreat and we'll focus on this meditation. This is like a regular attitude day after day. This is why true mystics who think like this, and I don't even want to use the word mystics, are always enjoy. They're always celebrating. Doesn't mean they're always making somersaults and dancing and so on, but internally they're alive. That's called being alive. Because they see life as constant opportunities. And not just selfish opportunities to make a few dollars, and they look at everything as another opportunity how you're going to make a profit. No, that doesn't necessarily make you more alive. It may make you more wealthy. It may make you even more miserable as well. Because when we take, we usually don't become happier. It's when we give, we become happier. But imagine seeing everything as a spiritual opportunity. And then basically the world and everything you interact is always alive, waiting for you to bring it alive by releasing the spark. So sparks, what are sparks? They're like little flames. But a flame, like a pilot flame, remains covered, concealed within layers and layers of existence. And it could seem dead, dormant. You come, and some energy, some effort, some initiative, you ignite something, you come alive and the spark comes alive. That's how the Kabbalists see the universe. It's a bunch of sparks, millions and millions of sparks. And each of us in this lifetime is allocated a certain amount of them, and your job is to bring them alive. And in turn it brings you alive. Like we see when flames touch each other, what happens? They become one, they join each other, they become more powerful. There are objects in this world, when you join them together, they compromise each other. Flames are not that way. Fire is not that way. Souls are not that way. There was one Hasidic Rebbe also who was playing with his brother, Rebbe Chassid. Children play what they see in their homes. So the two children, 4 and 5 years old. And they had these little games they would play. So one of them dressed up as a Rebbe, sat down with the garb. The other one walked in. And it was just a game, play acting. Is that the expression, play acting? No, something wrong. Is that it? Yeah. And one of them says to one kid says to the other, so tell me, what is a human being? What is a Jew? What is a human being? So he says, a human being is fire. So he grabs his brother's arm. So he says, well, if you're fire, how come I don't get burned? So he answers, because when fire touches fire, it doesn't get burned. So in life too, like words from the heart enter the heart. Love is like reflected like water reflects a face, so too, kamayim apanim lepanim, kain leva adam la'adam. There's a spark within each of us that when a person who knows how to touch sparks within themselves can touch it in you, there's something that transcends the usual, let's call it selfishness or boundaries that separate us. Now usually these moments happen and they go away. But we have the ability to make it come alive and stay alive. That doesn't mean we become naive and all misty-eyed and forget about the realities of life, that not everybody's in that place, and there are people who are predators and people who can use and so on. But you never lose, in a way, as experienced as you become, you never lose the hope that you can always find that spark anywhere. So it's a difficult challenge. It's one thing a kid or a young person never experienced any pain in the world. They say, there's beauty everywhere, there's sparks, I'm just going to find them all, everything comes alive. But when you've already experienced pain in your life, and you've seen harsh things, and you can still have the sparkle in your eyes, and still look for life everywhere, that's an amazing thing, because that person's not naive. They've seen the harshest. And that's very powerful to see when you see people who've gone through difficult, and they still have that ability to look for life. So when we talk about Chayei Sarah, the name of the chapter, even though afterward the whole story is about her death, you see, death is not looked at quite the same way. Yes, her physical life came to an end at this point. But her spiritual life continued on and on. Because you see, death in this context is only our blindness to see one stage of the journey. Because we can't see behind the curtain, we see it as the end. Which is why people say death is the end. And what's the beginning? Birth, conception. What about everything before and after those two? The best we could say, we don't know. But as you know, the analogy I've often given, and it's becoming more popular lately, and as they broadcast it somewhere, When people ask the question, so where does the soul go to after death? It's a common question. Where does the soul go? The question itself is based on a false assumption, is that you think you know where it's at, you're where it's at, and you're asking where the soul goes. So think of the imaginary dialogue between an appliance and electricity. So with the refrigerator speaking to electricity. So where do you go, says the refrigerator to electricity, when they pull the plug? No pun intended. They pull the plug, where do you go? And the electricity looks at the refrigerator, says, you pathetic little box. I don't know if that's exactly the words, but last I heard was something like that. You little box. They just invented you 100 years ago, 200 years ago. And you have the chutzpah to ask me where I go? I've been around from the beginning of time. Long before they invented gadgets like you and learned how to generate electricity, I existed. I'm everywhere, wherever electricity doesn't occupy time and space quite the same way. And then they figured out how to bottle me or contain me in a little box for a little while, and with some technology figured out how to refrigerate food. And now you think, you're it? I fit into your box for a little while. I go back to where I always was, not confined by you. Now, whether the refrigerator could understand that or not, I don't know. But we all can relate to that discussion. So, I'm not suggesting we know exactly where souls go to. But one thing for sure, we shouldn't assume that we know where it's at. Because all we really see is one little picture, one little, I would say, frame in a big film. The frame of conscious life. And I say conscious specifically. Unconscious we have no clue about. Let alone what is before birth and what is before death. So the soul is on a journey. Why is death painful? Is because on this earth, on this plane, in this stage, we don't see the next leg. So as our beloved ones, so to speak, leave their containers, their bodies, and they go back to the place of electricity, spiritual electricity of the soul, they see us, but we don't see them, and that's painful. So the pain is that you can't connect on your terms. So the Torah is telling us, but not everything is on your terms. You connect by connecting to the soul's life. What really makes somebody alive on this world? Don't deceive yourself into thinking that just because the doctors define life by biological terms, that's life. The life of Sarah, her real life, is the life of her soul, her virtue, her beauty, the way she changed people, the way she affected people. And that lives on through her children, through her husband. So though physically she's no longer on this plane, on this material plane, her life continues on. And when do you really see how alive a person is not when they're walking around and making a lot of noise and wielding power and influence. Because then you could say, hey, it's their power and influence. When do you see that they're really truly alive is when they physically are not here and they still have an impact. Can you imagine? How could they have an impact? They're not here. They're not here to touch you. They're not here to speak to you. They're not here in any physical way. The answer is because their soul is here. This is not a consolation and a way of saying that death means nothing. Absolute death is very painful, and we grieve, and we sit shiva. No one should know of this, but when a person dies, and I want to mention Philip, our good friend who gives the class tomorrow night, is not going to be giving it. His mother passed away, age 94, this past week. So we grieve over that, and we sit shiva, and we mourn. But what do we mourn? We mourn the connection between the box and the soul, between the body and the soul. That's what we mourn. We don't mourn the death as end. In a way, I don't want to use the word celebrate. We honor the soul's continuing in its journey. So when do you really know that Sarah is alive? You want to know when you know. That now we sit 3,500 years later in New York City in 2009, and we could talk about her as if she's right here. And you could be inspired by her message and by her life. Tell me how many people you know that are alive like that. Who will talk about us in 3,500 years? If they'll remember us. I mean, I'm saying we have the choice. That's called being alive. You know, yes, Aristotle was alive in his time, and he left books and students. Until this day, we still worship him as the prime Greek philosopher. But where are his grandchildren? If he was so brilliant, why didn't he leave a system that his family could embrace? Now, I'm not here to criticize him. He's not here to defend himself. But who knows? He could always manifest in one of you here. Spencer. Yeah? So, on the other hand, when it comes to Sarah, she left a child. She left a child called Isaac. And Isaac found a wife, Rebecca, or she found him, however you want to put it. And what did he see in her? He saw three virtues, as the end of the chapter tells us. Three virtues that become the foundation of every Jewish home till this day. The three virtues he saw a flame burning from Friday to Friday. I'm just using the literal medrash that Rashi quotes, cites it. The second thing, he saw a cloud of glory hovering over her tent. And the third thing, he saw a blessing in her dough. I mean, those are the literal expressions. I'll explain what they mean. The flame is the flame that we light before Shabbos. Shabbos candles. But he saw not just that she lit a Shabbos candle, he saw it burned from Friday to Friday. Whether this means literally that it burned or means the spirit of it that burned can be argued. But the point is that it wasn't just she lit a candle, is that she brought a peace. Because the idea of lighting a Shabbos candle is about shalom bayis. It's about bringing harmony in the home. So you could ask, what does a flame have to do with bringing harmony into a home? And what happens if you light it Thursday night? You don't make the blessing of it. There's something about it that has a power, a warmth, a glow, that's more than just the flame. The flame is symbolic, obviously. The soul of a human being is the flame of God. And when you do it on Friday night, before sunset, candle lighting time, the same on holidays, a woman has a power to bring a certain tranquility and harmony into the home. It's another discussion exactly how that happens. But he saw this virtue in his mother, and he saw it in his future wife. The second thing, he saw the cloud. It's actually more of a grace. He saw a subtlety, a deep feminine refinement that can be quite quantified in her. Some people associate it with a sacred sexuality, sensuality that is pure. Sensuality can be sometimes, let's say, used in negative ways, and sometimes it can be used in the most powerful ways. When it's in the most powerful ways, there's nothing as beautiful as it. When it's destructive, it can be nothing as ugly as it. And we all know sexuality can be the source of the greatest beauty and the greatest love in this world. It could also be the source of the greatest misery and loneliness in this world. So he saw in her a type of a refined spiritual sensuality. That didn't take away from her physical beauty. It just enhanced it. And the third thing, which was similar to his mother as well, and the third thing that he saw was the blessing in her food. I guess you could say it meant she was a good cook, as his mother was, but it means deeper than that. It means that she had a certain, you could eat a piece of good food, but you could also come into a home and you feel a certain, I don't even know the word for it. There's some type of a transcendent thing that you could feel in your grandmother's kitchen when she made a chicken soup. Or if you had the privilege to be in homes like that, it's not quite defined by any pure ingredients. It's, I guess, an invisible ingredient that you put into a challah or into a kishke. I don't think so, but maybe, yeah. My grandmother used to stick it in. She used to sew those, what they call the helzlach, the actual thing. I think it's illegal, actually, to do that in New York State. But it wasn't. I didn't really frankly like it that much, but I liked that she did it, And Hanukkah night, being the oldest grandson, I always would get the first latke. So it wasn't, even though they were quite good latkes, I must say, and I still carry some of them inside, you can tell. But it was something more. It was the love. It was the dedication. She made the latke for me, type of thing. So there's something about food that is not really the food. It's the love. You can deliver somebody great food, but if it doesn't have that ingredient, the bracha mitzvah b'isa. So these are the three virtues that he saw. And if we had more time, I can go into a whole workshop just on these three things. The point I want to make is that this never died. Sarah did not die through her virtues. Her son saw them, recognized them in Rebecca, and they passed them on. Until this day, they still live on. Yeah, I guess it's gone through some assimilation and some distortions. And frankly, many situations, the Jews are more focusing on the food than on the spirit within the food. That's true. It's also a problem. But somewhere something remains from the beauty of Sarah. And we sit and talk about it, and it could change our lives. It could help you build your home. I'm not just talking about some abstract inspiration. You have a human being, Sarah, Abraham, they lived their life a certain way. We know where they walked and how they talked and what they did. So yes, it was painful at the moment for Abraham that Sarah left him. And he with dedicated love, found her a burial plot and buried her in Oros HaMachpelah. But what lives on is not the pain. What lives on is that Chayes Sarah, she's alive. And that's why this chapter is called the life of Sarah, not the death of Sarah. And even last chapter, where you actually talk about her physical life, doesn't capture the life as you see it after her physical being is no longer there. So this is a challenge to us, as I said earlier, what we call life. And it's a practical thing that you can all, if you just apply yourself, you'll discover quite interesting things about your own attitude to yourself and to others. You know, when you say, you've been with somebody that's contagiously alive, you go with them and they just enjoy life. They know how to suck out, I guess, the marrow of every bone, metaphorically speaking, and just enjoy and know how to enjoy life. Now, of course, this can also be sometimes not exactly always healthy, but the idea is there's a certain adventure, a certain sense of life in there. If channeled properly, as I said earlier, it's how really we can look at life all the time that way. Everything is an opportunity. You're excited to meet people, excited to meet new people. Many of us cower in fear before we meet somebody new. We don't want to go to a party. We want to go where we're comfortable. What's going on is because you yourself and your own spark has become so shrouded in your own insecurity and fears that you're not alive. There's a part of you that is dead. I don't want to say dead in the final sense of it, but there's a part of you that has become deadened, let's put it that way, numbed. But the good news is it doesn't have to be that way. The spark is within you. Your soul is vibrant and alive. It's trapped inside of you. That's what it comes down to. Now, when I say you, I mean myself too. We all have a soul and many dimensions of it that are trapped. How do you release it? There's only one way to release it, not to will it. You have to interact. You have to engage. I'll just use myself as an example because it's just the easiest thing to do. I come here this evening. I've been doing this class for many, many years. Almost over 28 years. I guess I naturally enjoy it, but it doesn't mean that it's not easier to stay home and be in your bed. However, I'm interested in doing that because that is called being dead from my point of view, and sitting here with you is for me being alive. Every one of us has blessings and gifts that you can give to others. When you allow yourself to give, you allow your soul out of its prison. Simple as that. Your soul is full of faculties, it's brimming with energy, waiting to be released. Using Michelangelo's terms, the angel is trapped in the marble, and you have to carve to set her free. We all have angels like that. We all have dimensions of our soul. Even if some of you comes out sometimes, some alive, there's still dimensions that can still be actualized. And that happens when you allow yourself to take risks. You allow yourself to go out, engage other people, try something new, maybe take upon yourself a responsibility to help someone else. I was just speaking to someone who I was actually quite pleasantly shocked. One of the most selfish people I ever met, let's put it that way. No names, so I'm not going to... if any of you are competitors, please present yourself. We can make a competition. Who's the... Okay, yeah. Very good. Which Torah class did you hear that? And which Torah class did you hear that? Okay. Anyway, I met him a while ago, and I see something's changed. Not completely yet, but hopefully it's getting there. And he's so excited to share with me something. And it was the first time I actually saw real excitement from him, because selfish people may be excited for the moment when they think they're getting something, some conquest, but it doesn't usually last long. And people who are giving, the moment they may not be so comfortable giving, but in the long term they last very long. The fruits of your efforts. And I see he has this type of natural excitement. And I ask him, he says, something very interesting that happened to me. He's a guy that I have such close relationship, I can tell him how selfish he is. That's the good news. And the bad news is it doesn't bother him. So there's always this two sides to every. Don't worry, he tells me some things too, in return. Tit for tat. And he says to me, a few months ago, someone came to me and asked me to volunteer to take their place, because they were going traveling, and once a week they would volunteer to spend time for an hour a week with a Down syndrome child. I remember I gulped simply because I didn't imagine this guy is going to do that. But and he says to me, I went, and after my friend came back, I asked if I could have another child that I would like to spend time with. He says, it's the most amazing experience. I thought I'd be there. We can't wait to leave. Being able to help a child like that, and the love that I got in return was more than anything I've ever received, unconditional. As I said, I was very happy to hear what he was saying. But I saw here as a person who I thought the spark was very deeply, let's put it this way, it was laying dormant for a long time in a very dark place. I mean, he has many qualities, but I mean, this part of him was blocking him from relationships. Every date he went, and he was a good guy in many ways, but when push came to shove, his own self-preservation just took over, and that's it. And I felt sad for him. I was really and I saw. I mean, I didn't really push the point. I wasn't trying to, in any way, make a case against him. I still does it, and hopefully it'll get him in greater places. But it's interesting that sometimes these things that we are. Maybe, I guess we live in such an insecure world that we think that if I don't hoard and take, who knows where I'm going to lose and who knows what's going to be with me. And the idea that giving can be so healthy for us is not such an easy thing for us to understand. I don't know why it is. It makes sense. And you have to convince people that if you give, you get an award, or you'll be honored, or because you give, you'll be able to sit on the board with other people and get business that deals with them. That comes an incentive. In other words, basically, your taking becomes an incentive for giving a little because you'll be able to take some more. Which, fine, so be it. God created the world in such a way, whatever it is. Ulterior motives bring you to pure motives. That's fine. I'm not here to criticize human nature. It's human nature. People, self-interest. But the fact is, the biggest secret in life, the secret that you learn from Sarah is that the truest, most people that are most alive are the givers in life. And giving means just an attitude. It's not just technically, throwing somebody a bone. It's an attitude that your life is to illuminate, to warm others. What happens then is your soul comes alive. Your soul begins to shine because it has to be drawn outward. It's like when your talents are challenged. When you're challenged and you must perform. That's really what it does. So that brings somebody truly alive. Whereas you spend a life taking and protecting yourself, for whatever good reason you may justify it, you end up imploding, and it becomes more and more filled with yourself. And there's never any release. And when there's no release, things die. Look, what is the sign of life? Breath. Neshama, neshima. A soul is like breath. When you know you're breathing, and I don't just mean lungs are breathing, your whole body is breathing. They say the circulation, that all your organs and your arteries, everything, there's a movement, mobility. There's a constant flow, ebb and flow, a constant give and take. That's a sign of life. When the person, and we are the only human beings on this earth, are able to go through, become lethargic to the point of stagnating, where you can become a couch potato. And you can just sit so self-contained and really kill yourself. You're killing yourself because you're not allowing yourself to be mobile. How is a soul mobile when it's out there serving, when it's helping? Now all this makes so much sense when you think about it. But when it comes down to it, it's our old habits, it's our fears and our insecurities that just keep us trapped. That's how it is. But we have the ability, when we read this chapter, Chai Sarah, this chapter is not just another chapter. It means that we are living with the times, and right now the energy flowing into this universe is giving us all a little strength from Sarah of how to truly be alive. With many healthy years in our bodies, in this container, in the refrigerator, or whatever appliance you are. But at the same time, to be alive in the fullest sense of the word. So in that sense, it's beyond biological, beyond emotional, beyond intellectual. It's spiritual. And even beyond spiritual, as I mentioned, beyond transcendent, there's the oneness. That may require more work. But the idea that each of us can commit each week of our lives, each day of our lives, to releasing sparks, to bringing alive things that seem dead. As I said, inanimate objects, but they have alive sparks. You do something with them, and you bring them alive. There's an interesting, you could say, contradiction in the Mishnah, in the Talmud. It asks the question, why would Adam and Eve, the human race, why were they created the last day of creation? On day 6, Friday. You have the Genesis story, the biblical narrative of creation. Day 1 was light. Day 2 was the separation of the upper and lower waters. Day 3, vegetation. Day 4, the luminaries, the sun and the moon and the stars, all the celestial bodies. And day 5, the animal kingdom, and day 6, Adam and Eve. So the Mishnah asks, why were they created last if the whole purpose of creation is that human beings come onto earth and bring everything to fruition, and the purpose of it all, they should have been created first. So there's two contradictory answers in the Mishnah. One says, in a derogatory way, that should a human being not behave properly, we will be told, who do you think you really are? Even as a lowly insect was created before you. Don't get so arrogant. And then there's a second answer given, the opposite. That since Adam and Eve are like the guests at a table, so first you set a table, then you bring the guests. I hope we all do that. You don't first sit the guests down and then you set the table. So God did the same. He created the universe, set the table, for all the beautiful parts of the whole nature, and then brought the two guests, which is all of us really. Now, which one is it? Are we the special guests, or are we lower than insects? So the answer, of course, is up to us. As I mentioned before, depends who's walking on the cobblestones. So if you tear off an apple from a tree, or indulge in any other thing in this earth, and not just animal or vegetable, even mineral, even walking on stones, and you're walking to do something destructive, or you're using the energy of the food that you just consumed to hurt somebody, so in a certain cosmic way, certain mystical way, this food says to you, what right did you have to take me, to ingest me inside of you, to go hurt someone else? You want to hurt, to do it on your own. Why are you bringing me, making me a partner? Because without my strength, without the energy you got from me, the food, you wouldn't have been able to do it. Then you're lower than an insect, because an insect doesn't do things like that. An insect follows God's guidelines. Animals don't waver from the game plan. They perhaps can't transform the world for the better, but they also don't destroy the world for the worse. So the apple would have been peaceful on the tree. You know what? I'd rather be here not doing anything better than my life, but definitely not helping destroy life. When a tzaddik, when a righteous person consumes the food or walks on the stones, so the world cries out, thank you for making me able to do something that I could never have done. The apple on the tree could never have helped another human being, because it would have remained there. Yes, it would have its purpose, and I'm sure nature cycles and the ecosystem would have been balanced, but to participate in actually improving the universe beyond the apple's personality and potential would never have been possible had that apple or that food not been part of a greater cause. And then it thanks. So we say, the expression goes, tzaddikim gam b'misosim kruim chayim. Righteous people, even in their deaths, they're called alive, like Sarah. And wicked people, rishayim gam b'chayim kruim mesim. And wicked people, even in their lifetimes, they're called dead. Now, what do you mean they're dead? They're walking around, they're hurting people. But the real definition of life, the real definition of the soul, is dead in them. Yeah, they're technically alive, physically alive. So I submit here that all of us have both these dimensions. Oh, there are times we do good things, times we don't do such good things. I include myself in this. So there are times that we are deadening or numbing our souls, and sometimes that we're bringing them alive. when you're aware of this, have the cure of any illness is awareness. The first step to, redemption of your own soul. And we have the power. We have the choice. The apple on the tree does not have the choice. It requires a human being to do either or, as I mentioned, or leave it alone. Everything in this universe does not have the choice. We have the choice, as we actively, constantly utilize it. And so everything in nature has its own life. You'll never find, for instance, an obese animal, except if humans corrupted it. Or there's some type of anomaly of nature. You'll never find any animal doing some type of unhealthy habit, getting addicted to something. Yeah, they can today. With tests, they've gotten monkeys addicted to cocaine, but that's human beings imposing it. It says during the flood, why did God have to kill the animals? It's because the humans corrupted the animals. I don't want to compare it to, the guy told me that he's taking his dog to therapy once a month. I'm not kidding, by the way. Because him and his girlfriend fight all the time. The dog is getting very agitated from it. So he's taking the dog to therapy. I hope it helps. At least the dog maybe. I don't know, maybe they should go to therapy. This is not a joke. Check it out. Google it. There are besides hospitals, there are also, yeah. And it's interesting. I think maybe the dogs should be the therapists too, if they're being therapy for dogs. But it's humans that are therapists for dogs. Interesting. I guess someone's making some money. What do they say? The psychotic builds castles in the air, the neurotic lives in them, and the psychiatrist collects rent from both. That's what they say. So, anyway, so we do have the choice, and we can exercise it at every given moment. I have memories of people in my life that were older people who were, as I describe here, really alive. You talk to them, a type of enthusiasm, how they told a story. As I said before, these are people who suffered greatly. My father, who his soul left his container 4.5 years ago, was a person like that. He was a storyteller. Sometimes that means the story was more than what happened, but that's another story. And he was a journalist, and he had that, and he suffered greatly in his life. He grew up in Stalinist Russia. But that type of energy and adventure and sense of constantly being stimulated and curious about life, by the human condition. As old as he was, I remember him even waning in the hospital. He had diabetes, and he was barely able to move. And there was some guy that came to see him. My father could barely speak. So I said, so what do you think about the guy? He says, he was always a bluffer, and he's still a bluffer. This is a man in the last day of his life, I couldn't stop laughing. And I saw my father, he got it to that last moment. He was alive. Now, unfortunately, his body gave way, so that's how it is. And I'm sure you all have people in your life that you know that way. And I mean consistently. We all have moments like that, consistently. And I don't know if you can really always study. I don't know, my father, was he naturally that way? Did he work in it? I'm not really sure. But I do know, in the study of, as I said, of Kabbalah and Hasidus, the idea of the dancing particles, the idea that the universe is filled, and we are faced all the time with things coming our way that are filled with life, waiting to be released, is definitely the way a person can initiate and ignite that type of spark. It's an attitude, but it's one that takes training to really begin to think that way. Because remember, as I said, we are trapped in the habit of thinking about ourselves and self-interest. You come to a situation, how could I benefit from it? You don't really think about how you can release the opportunity, unless there's something in it for you. And as soon as the in it for you comes into play, or it dominates, you right away numb the situation. It becomes lifeless. Think of it this way. You ever feel you meet somebody, and you right away see they want to use you for something. What does it do to the relationship? It doesn't actually I wouldn't call it energizes it. It numbs it. Now, if you think it's worth it for you, you go play along. If you don't, it's not, you feel like you're being drained. The people you talk, you feel you're drained every time you talk to them. Whatever reason it is. And then there are people you meet and you talk to them, there's a certain natural giving, there's a certain natural lightness of spirit, I guess, and you come alive, and they come alive. This happens all the time, but this isn't accidental. We have control over this. You don't usually think about it, but think about it. So think next time you meet someone, are you draining them or are you empowering them? Maybe you should ask the person, say, tell me, did I drain you today or what? That would be interesting. If they're really honest, they'll say, you don't know. But it's a good question. And also, the other way around, not that you have to go around with a business card and say, listen, I don't want to be drained today, or something like that. But it's also good to know who your friends are. What's your Rolodex like? And what kind of people you hang around. Numbness breeds numbness. And life breeds life. That's how it works. The strongest people are the people that can bring life even to a numb place. Some people like life just avoid the drainers, so to speak, and they just stay around with other people with life. But there's an expression in Judaism that's called as being alive, and there's chaim, that's life. L'chaim, you say, to life. This is really the meaning when we say l'chaim. What do we say l'chaim? So it's a toast on alcohol. But what does it really mean? So some people think it means because you drink a little alcohol, it makes you feel like it gives you a jolt. No, that's not the case. It's when you drink your alcohol, maybe it distracts you from your own self a little and allows the sparks to come alive. Maybe that's what it means. So we say l'chaim, they say chaim, and then there's a thing called mechaya chaim, which means to give life to the living. So the question is, what's mechaya chaim? What's the difference between the two? So one is being alive yourself, and the other is that you're able to bring others alive. Obviously, that requires even more than just being alive, because then you have so much power that even when something is inanimate or something is not completely there, you can resurrect it, so to speak. And we all have this power. That's the bottom line. And that's Chayim Sarah. Chayim Sarah, the story of the life of Sarah. And it's captured more when she's physically not there than when she's there. That's the central theme of the story. And that's why we name it that way. So where does it leave us? It leaves us with choices. If you want to begin, you can begin tonight. If you're too tired, you can begin tomorrow morning. But it's an attitude. All I can do really is share the ideas, the thoughts, inspiration. What it comes down to is when we all go back to our lives, and we go back to our little corners, and everyone in their own little lonely place, where you make your decisions or you don't make your decisions, that's where you have to make your choice. But I think if you pay attention to this, it could really change life. I always like to mention this in context of relationships. I guess because New York is the mecca of singles, or the epidemic, some call it, whatever you want to call it. What is a relationship if it's not the incarnation or the manifestation of real life? Two people who meet and they fall in love with each other. What is that? What's going on there? Two people who were once strangers may have passed each other and never even noticed each other, and suddenly each of them are not only attracted to each other, but they both energize each other. And some spark, some charge comes, and they see each other. That's called sparks coming alive. So why is it that we have such difficulty finding healthy relationships? Well, I'll tell you, it's directly connected to what you call life. For many of us, it's the charge itself. It's not sustainable. So whether it becomes something that is driven by sexual energy, which doesn't necessarily have the intimate dimension called commitment. Well, many people actually are proud of the fact that they have sexual relationships and there's no commitment. They consider that emancipation, freedom. Get the best of both worlds, as someone once told me, or more than one person. The definition of life is getting what you need right now, satisfying yourself. And I'm not saying it's not pleasurable and enjoyable, but is that called life? So there you have sparks perhaps coming out of the relationship, but the question is, how long will they last? Will they last after their lifetimes? For sure, and it doesn't even last during their lifetimes. And then there's another way of looking at it, that the relationship has the potential to release sparks besides the sexual and besides the immediate, ones that can build something that will be lasting and perpetuate. And that requires a different perspective on life that's not just about you, and your immediate needs. It's about context. It's about the long term. Sarah was a person who knew this in her lifetime, and that's why we talk about her today. Those that did not know that in their lifetime are long forgotten. Now, this is not about being remembered forever. It's really about living up to your fullest potential. I have no doubt that relationships suffer today because we have distorted perspective on what means being alive, what means being stimulated, what means being charged up, as they call it. The Doors sang the song "Light My Fire," which got them into some trouble on the Ed Sullivan show, right? It's interesting, as anarchistic as Jim Morrison was. On the other hand, the expressions like come from the Torah, really. Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, light the fire of the soul. It's all about, the Torah is all about lighting flames and lighting fires, and fires that are rising. But if you look at the Doors, look at what happened to them. What happened to him particularly. Yeah, it was a lot of energy there, but it was, I don't mean to try to be too cute, but he also sang a song called "The End," right? Death is the end. And the morbidness of it, you could say even the depression of it, the fatalism. In Judaism, the idea of lighting a fire is not some type of escape from the monotony and the boredom of life. It's lighting a spark of the soul that when you light it, can burn forever. The menorah burned all the time, Ner Tamid, in the temple. That wasn't just a nice thing. It was demonstrating that true flames, when you bring them alive, should burn all the time. So I want to wish everybody here, not just with the ability to revisit your own definition of life, but to actually access within our souls that dimension, and find people that can help spark yours, and let them spark, and you spark theirs. That's an interesting commitment in the Parsha Chayesara. And we should only live and be long and many healthy years. So I'm not suggesting the second half. In her case, it happens to be the story of Sarah does pass away this week's chapter. But what we celebrate is the life. And we are here today alive, physically alive, maybe on other dimensions. And what we learn is, and you hear this evening, is that you can be more alive than you've ever been before. And when you have that perspective, it can change your life in dramatic ways, very powerful ways. Finally, a quote that I think I use the quote in Torah Meaning for Life. Remember this, since we're all into so-called the fountain of youth and trying to capture immortality, whether it's through Botox or through other interesting methods, the secret to immortality is this, that only the body ages. The soul, as the years go on, becomes more vibrant and more powerful, because the soul is not subject to the erosion and the aging process of the physical world. Think about that. So, again, I conclude with saying that may God bless us all with bringing each other more alive and perhaps revolutionizing our own lives in that sense, that wherever you go you see life and you are able to ignite it, and in turn ignites you as well. So a few announcements. Let me say the following: that tomorrow night Philip will not be giving the class because he's still sitting Shiva. If anybody wants to make any condolences, send condolences to him, just call my office. You'll get his email or his phone number, or where he's staying. And my son will be giving. That week my son also gave a class here, so there will be a class. My son Mendel will be filling in for Philip tomorrow at 7 p.m. Another announcement is that November 24th, right, there's a musical tribute here, Moshe Hecht and Friends, a great new artist, in honoring the Mumbai victims, and literally a year ago, so it's the first yard site. And we will be having a grand Hanukkah party on December 16th, Wednesday night. So you can mark your calendar, more details to come. It'll be even surpass last year's event, if you were here. So that's some small announcements. And please see the Meaningful Life Center. Hey, new take on life, Meaningful Life, as trying to bring alive some sparks within ourselves and within everybody else. And we welcome you to participate. One way to do that is leave us your email address, and we'll send you some sparks into cyberspace. And what What else can I say? Well, it's always an honor and pleasure to sit with you. It always feels a little sad to say goodbye. So we won't say goodbye, we'll just say we'll take a break from one Wednesday to the next. So everyone have a very good night, a good week. Thank you.